Good afternoon and welcome to our MS conversation about NDIS operational matters. Today I'm joined by Robin Lang and Claire Wyatt, who are working together with me around the NDIS implementation. We have had a range of questions raised by various people from MS organisations across Australia, and today we're going to be asking those questions and getting answers from Robin and Claire. So I'm going to start off with Robin and ask her to just talk a little bit about the core requirements to eligibility for the NDIS and what the process a little bit involves.
Hi everyone, and thanks Deb. So the core requirements are that you are under 65 years of age, that you meet residency and citizenship criteria, and that you have a disability that impacts on your daily activities. If somebody answers yes to all those questions, then they move on to a more complex set of questions that are in the access request form that the agency sends out on request.
So Robin, in that access request form, I know that people are asked to provide evidence of their disability. Do you want to just elaborate on what that might look like?
Okay, so here the agency is looking for specific levels of impairment that somebody might have, and the best person or people to fill out that section of the form would either be your GP, if you have a good relationship with them, or a neurologist, or another allied health professional who can complete that section for you. That's called evidence of disability. The rest of the form is mostly around demographics and, the usual questions around age, address, and whether you're male or female.
And what we know is there are a number of people who don't see themselves as having a disability. So what do those people think about the NDIS?
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations I have with people with MS, so our consumers, is they see themselves as having a health issue, and they don't relate at all to the concept of having a disability. So it takes several conversations to help people get their head around that concept and maybe see that the way they're managing their MS, and quite often they have just been managing it for a long time and don't really realise that there are supports and services out there that could help them and that they do fall under the NDIS.
Good. Claire, there are a number of resources around to assist people in preparing for their NDIS conversation. What are some of the hints or tips that you use?
Yes, thanks, Deb. Hello, everybody. A couple of tips that I've used are really, firstly, to ensure that the consumer is well prepared for their planning meeting by investing time and exploring their individual circumstances, helping them to formulate a plan and to look at their life's aspirations, which would obviously include needs, goals, and the current support systems that they currently have, and what have been the barriers in pursuing these goals. And I find the MS NDIS checklist is a very good tool in actually facilitating this. I think the second thing that I'm quite keen on talking to our consumers about is to let them know that this is really their platform to express their goals, but not to become overwhelmed by the whole planning situation, because it can be quite intimidating, and to let them know that plans can be reviewed, at different stages if their circumstances change, and they're a dynamic work in progress.
Claire, can I add something there? I've had lots of conversations with people when they're heading towards the planning meeting, and they are a little bit overwhelmed by it or intimidated. I think it's really important that both you and I have in the past talked to them about it being a conversation and it's not an assessment, and that tends to make people feel a little more comfortable with the whole process.
Absolutely, Robin. And I've, attended numerous planning meetings, and I feel they really are a conversation between the planner and the participant. And my role, in these meetings has been to offer some support and reassurance and try to instill some confidence in the consumer so that they can articulate their goals.
Yeah, it's a very good and important point. And so just in terms of comfort of people going into those conversations, where can those conversations be had and who can attend those conversations?
In my experience here in the Hunter trial, Deb, the conversations can take place either at the NDIS offices or indeed in a client's, or sorry, in a consumer's home if they request, or possibly even in a coffee shop. It really seems to be determined by the consumer, and they can choose to have whomever they really want at a planning meeting, either from a family member, a friend, or a professional person that they may be linked with.
Okay. So that's makes people feel a little bit more at home and relaxed about the whole situation as well. With somebody that, Robin, is deemed to not be eligible based on the fact that they perhaps don't have a disability or a significant impairment, what's the process that someone can go through?
Okay, it's a fairly easy process. It's just a matter of getting in contact with the agency and asking for a review of the decision that the agency made. There's a form they can fill out if they want to, but it doesn't have to be that formal. I also probably need to add that if you are deemed ineligible once, that doesn't mean that you cannot reapply in the future.
Yeah. So Claire, people under 65 years of age who already have a home care package, for instance, can they be considered for the NDIS?
Yes, Deb, they'll be able to apply for the NDIS if they're currently receiving a package of care, or they may even transition to the NDIS through the Living Life My Way pathway, which I believe is a New South Wales incentive, and it is something that has to be applied for. So if you have a current service provider who's offering services, you can apply through that service provider to apply for the Living Life My Way, which it actually then you can then be offered individualized packages of care in readiness for the NDIS. So you can then be allocated a package of funding that you can then manage your own care, manage your own funds, and this is being offered to people in New South Wales just to help them prepare for the process of the NDIS.
Okay, and I think there are similar situations occurring in some of the other places as well. So so then just to keep on moving along, Robin, what are some of the supports and services that we've seen in the participant plans so far, and where does coordination of support fit into those plans?
Okay, so some of the more common supports and services that people are receiving are assistance with domestic help, so that would be cleaning in the home, maybe some meal preparation, garden assistance in the form of mowing or weeding. Other common supports are occupational therapy assessments and physio assessments to determine what sort of supports a person might need in terms of home modifications or a physio plan to help them build strength. Transport is another common support that people are receiving, as is continence support in terms of education and equipment.
Mm-hmm. And Claire, you provide and do quite a lot of the coordination of supports. So do you want to talk about what you see as being different about coordinating someone's supports and the role that you played versus case management?
Yes, Deb. I mean, I do feel that support coordination or support connection is certainly more of a two-way conversation with the participant rather than it being prescriptive. it's a support role where we are encouraging the participant to be in the driving seat, making the decisions. I mean, obviously, the support coordinator role is there to guide that consumer through the process, and also to monitor ongoing supports that they are receiving. But it's certainly, in my experience, certainly the consumer who's making those decisions, and my role is there to support and advocate for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then just elaborating a little bit more on supports and services, one of the questions that we've had is what types of home modifications have we seen approved? Do either of you want to make comment around that?
Yes, I mean, if you don't mind, Robin, I'll just mention a couple of the home mods that I've seen. I've had clients who've had modifications done to bathrooms. They've had a more accessible shower put in. I've had clients who've had a ramp put into the front porchway so that they can access their drive or access the door well slightly more easily with the use of a four-wheeled walker. So they're the home mods that I've seen. What about you, Robin?
Yeah, the only one I'd add is some rails up the stairs, and just to help access either out the back. I know one woman that I was speaking to got a ramp and rails put out the back so that she could actually go and hang out her washing. Made the world of difference for her.
Yeah, and I'd just comment that, you know, hierarchy of need is important to think about if you're a therapist, is that the NDIS is about reasonable and necessary, and so it's important for therapists to think about when they're making an assessment of somebody's home or situation, to think about what's going to assist them without making them dependent, and what is reasonable for the agency to fund versus something that might be funded down the track. I know that we've had situations, and there's a question around someone going to hospital and then on discharge needing perhaps a transition package. What's the situation around transition packages and the NDIS? You know, who's responsible for discharge? Claire?
Yeah, Deb, my understanding is that hospitals will obviously still continue to offer transitional packages to people who don't have an NDIS plan. But if a person does have a plan, I believe that it would be the role of the support coordinator to link into, have a conversation with the discharge planner about what that consumer's needs are at the time of discharge, and then really for the support coordinator to approach the planner if there indeed has been a change in circumstances, to look at possibly increasing services.
Okay. So it's not really reasonable, is it, for NDIS to be funding health activities? So, you know, someone needs to, they need to take responsibility for the safe discharge and put in the relevant services for them. Robin, what other examples could we draw on for reasonable and necessary to give people an idea of what is reasonable and necessary?
So in terms of, for example, somebody who's working and is having difficulty maintaining their work and their home life because of maybe fatigue issues, it would be reasonable and necessary for them to receive some domestic assistance so that they can continue to work and participate fully in their family life, for example, helping children with homework or going to sport, and not having to make decisions that if they have to clean the house, they either can't do anything else on the weekend or they're too tired to get to work. So it would be very reasonable for them to be receiving some domestic assistance and maybe even some meal preparation as well. The agency's, one of their aims is to make sure that people can continue, if it's their goal, to stay working and participating in the community.
Yes, Robin, and I actually have a client who falls in that category. And again, at the planning meeting, you know, the consumer looked well, and it's again a good insight for the planners to see yet another hidden symptom of MS. And this, this lady, she has chronic fatigue with the MS. We went to the planning meeting. She got some domestic assistance. She'd previously had quite a lot of sick time off work because she was so fatigued, and then became unwell. But since having a planning meeting, this lady now has domestic assistance. She's remained well. She's not as fatigued, and her sick days have reduced dramatically.
Yeah. I think it's important too to talk about those sorts of examples, because for somebody with a higher level of impairment, it's quite evident that they need supports and services. I speak to lots of people who say to me, I don't think I'd be eligible because I'm working. Well,
Yes,
that's actually not the case.
Yeah, and it's goal orientated, isn't it? The NDIS is about goals and what are the barriers to you achieving those goals, and then they put in the supports and services to help you achieve those goals. So, your goals can be around maintaining relationships or improving relationships. That social and economic participation and community inclusion is what the NDIS is all about. So one of the other services or supports that the NDIS will fund is vehicle modifications, and so that usually takes place following an assessment by an occupational therapy, and sometimes that even requires some driving lessons as well. So Claire, how quickly do planners readdress the supports in a plan for someone that may have had a significant change in their circumstances, had a relapse of their MS symptoms?
Yes, Deb. I've approached planners numerous times when my consumers have had a change in their circumstances, and I can only talk about my experience in the Hunter trial, but certainly planners are quick to respond, particularly if a consumer is having a relapse.
Okay. So respite, where does that fit into the scheme? Does Robin or Claire, both of you, like to comment? Claire, do you want to talk about in-home respite?
Yes.
You had examples?
I do. I have a consumer who has quite high care needs and is supported predominantly by her husband out of their own choice. And within the plan, she has in-home respite to allow her husband really to have some time away from the caring role, because he's under quite a lot of carer stress. And so she has day, evening and weekend in-home respite to cover a 24-hour period over 5 days, so that her husband can take a break when he feels overwhelmed.
Okay. And I do know that facility-based respite, which many people have accessed in the past, is just been renamed, and it's called short-term accommodation with assistance, and that is available to people where it is absolutely necessary and is seen to be reasonable and necessary for that family. So just one other question that's high on the list here is NDIS seems to support the idea of physio programs being delivered by therapy assistants. What do you think the risks are, and how does that happen?
I have a client who her goal was to stand up with a stand-up lifter, and the physiotherapist went out to do an initial assessment, organised the equipment, and actually has commenced training the carers to help my consumer to stand up periodically, and it's working pretty well. And my consumer called me 2 weeks ago to tell me that she'd stood up, the first time she'd stood, in 6 months, she stood up for a minute, which was fantastic for her. I guess, the risk could be that, to avoid risk, I think, let's talk about avoiding risk. To avoid risk, I think it would be, imperative that the carers or the therapy assistants are trained efficiently and are monitored on an ongoing basis.
Great. Robin, the few times we've mentioned today about the MS checklist, and this was something that was created through an identified need by a number of people with MS. How is that different to the workbook, the NDIS workbook?
Okay, so the NDIS workbook was developed by the NDIS, and it has to meet the requirements of people from a wide range of disabilities. And we saw that there was a need for our consumers to have something that was much more specific, that helped them to work out what their needs were, what their goals were, what the barriers were, and that is why we developed the MS checklist. So used in conjunction, they're really good tools to help somebody be well prepared for their planning meeting.
I'm going to, I think, end the conversation at that point. There's some of the operational rules that exist, and there are many, many more. And there is the ms.org NDIS page that you can visit. I was going to ask Robin for a final wrap-up or words of wisdom first, and then Claire.
Okay, so I work with a lot of consumers who are not very far down the track, and for them it's quite confronting for them to see themselves as a person with disability. And so we have a lot of conversations around how somebody is impacted by their MS and how their daily activities are impacted, and it helps them come to an understanding of how the NDIS might help them. So I'm excited to see, as the scheme rolls out across Australia, how we'll be working with all our consumers to help them to understand the possibilities. And I think a good way to have a look at some different stories of people and their plans is to look at our videos that we have, and it's on our website at www.ms.org.au/NDIS, and it's called NDIS Videos.
And I'd also just add to that there's a range of 9 information sheets there currently too that just can help you understand what the processes are around eligibility, around the planning conversation, and around the planning process. But I'm going to hand over to Claire now for her final words of wisdom for us.
All right, thanks, Deb. Well, like Robin, I obviously work with consumers, but I work on the flip side. I'm working with consumers who are well into their plans, and I have honestly seen some life-enhancing changes for consumers due to the goals that they have initially set in their plans. And my hope for the future is that the NDIS remains equitable and it can be sustained.
Great. Thank you both, Robin and Claire, for your insights today. And we look forward to bringing you another a category of questions and answers in the near future. Goodbye for now.